Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. I'm Jaxi, your host, and through SecPod webcast, we bring you the latest happenings at SecPod and exciting stuff that we're working on to provide security assurance to every connected device. Today's session is on going beyond traditional vulnerability management, and we have a lot to talk to you about. I'd like to introduce today's presenters. I have with me Chandrasekhar, CEO at SecPod, and then also Kaushik, who directs our engineering group. They're here to talk to you about some of the recent developments at SecPod, what we have been doing, all these, I think, for the last quarter and two, and we'll be talking about some of the things that we have been developing at SecPod. Before we begin, I'd like to remind all that a recorded version of this session will be available on Bright Talk and also on our YouTube channel. We will also send a recording to your email after this session so you can watch it and share with others in your team. Towards the end of the session, we will have a Q&A session. We'll love to hear from you what if you have any questions, and Chanda and Kaushik are here to answer your queries during or after the session. You can keep posting your questions and we'll take it up towards the end of the session. For those of you just joining us, welcome. And with that, Chandra, I'll leave the stage to you to tell us what you have been doing recently and what do we have to, what should the audience expect from us?
All right. Thank you, Jaxir. Good morning and good evening to all of you. Thank you for taking the time to be part of our session today. I'm certainly excited over the last weekend and throughout this week. I'm sure you heard of some of these announcements that we made. I'm particularly excited to talk about this, this 5.0 release that we have made with significant changes and enhancements that have been made to SanerNow platform, in particular the security, risk and compliance, and vulnerability management. So with 5.0, SanerNow has become more powerful, simpler and easier, and also intelligent. I say intelligent because in order to automate, tools must be intelligent. And with this journey that we have taken to reinvent vulnerability management, we have taken it to the next level. Now, why did we need to reinvent? Of course, there are challenges that must be addressed in vulnerability management, and that is the reason why we need to relook at vulnerability management within a different prism. If you look at vulnerability management tools and practices that are available today, are being implemented today by most organizations, typically scans are run once in a month, a quarterly exercise, or a biannual exercise to do a risk assessment activity. And that activity invariably throws reports that run into thousands of pages. And then person who is responsible for mitigating these vulnerabilities have to figure out ways to either apply patches or whatever else that needs to be performed in order to eliminate that vulnerability. So there is enormous manual labor that is required to do that. And that typically takes a few months together to mitigate or eliminate those vulnerabilities that are identified. Now, on one hand, there are new vulnerabilities that are being reported almost on a daily basis. About 50 to 60 new vulnerabilities get added into the NIST's CVE database. On the other hand, we are relying on a method that runs scanning once in a quarter or a monthly activity. So that's kind of irony, because these vulnerabilities are being exploited at a very alarming rate. And also the scale of the attack these days has tremendously increased. So we hear about very high profile attacks invariably each day, and each of those exploits or attack attempts have exploited or made use of a vulnerability that is present in the IT system. Now, that definitely calls for attention, something that must be done to recheck the vulnerability management practice. So obviously that must be made simple, and it must be made automated, and more importantly, it must be a continuous activity. And in addition to that, sorry, I guess the slide went off for a short period. In addition to that, fix must be part of the solution. So I talked about security administrators and IT administrators taking 4 to 5 months to mitigate those vulnerabilities. And so that is because of all the disintegrated multiple point products that are required to mitigate these vulnerabilities that are identified. So with these two coming together, a vulnerability management practice can really be effective in order to eliminate those vulnerabilities that are being exploited by attackers. So what we are announcing today with our SanerNow platform is that uh, our platform is end-to-end vulnerability management product that kind of automates this process of performing a vulnerability scanning to daily routine. When I say vulnerability management here, it's not just performing a scan and identifying the CVEs or reporting the CVEs. Vulnerability management has actually got bigger. So there are some requirements that must be part of a vulnerability management solution mandatorily. That includes having visibility to the asset and performing an asset exposure analysis to identify what devices are there and what applications are installed and what is the exposure to each of these. Are there outdated systems available, present within the enterprise network or not? And then detecting vulnerabilities on a day-to-day basis, and that must go beyond CVE. CVE database, if you look at the 2020 count, it was closer to about 20,000 vulnerability. But there are a significant number of vulnerabilities that are never part of them, that are never assigned a CVE identifier. So a vulnerability management product must also go beyond detection of the CVEs and also identify those other vulnerabilities, the other critical vulnerabilities that are not assigned with a CVE. The third requirement for a vulnerability management product is to perform a security posture analysis across all these devices, more from compliance and system hardening perspective, to ensure that these devices do not have inherent loophole or some configuration errors that are there which can be easily exploited by the attackers. And the fourth part or a primary requirement for a vulnerability management product is to mitigate those vulnerabilities that are, that are identified by the vulnerability management product. So mitigation can be by application of patch, but it can also be other things. Could be that there is an unwanted service that is running and you don't want that to be running anymore, or there are certain applications that are installed in various systems and may not be uh, required, or it's kind of an application that should not be installed within an organization environment. So there are all these options in order to eliminate those vulnerabilities. And a vulnerability management product must have those capabilities to go beyond just application of patches. So with our SanerNow platform, we address all of these capabilities within a single solution, and we automate that entire process end to end. It's a full-fledged vulnerability management suite of product. And with 5.0, we have made one significant enhancement. SanerNow is known for covering vulnerabilities and patches for the endpoints, desktop laptops, and the servers running on Windows, Linux, and Mac. But with 5.0, we've also enhanced this capability to go into the network infrastructure itself, assessing vulnerabilities present in routers and switches and different applications that are listening for network traffic, and could be IP-enabled telephone or SCADA system, etc. So we've been able to enhance our coverage to perform vulnerability assessment on these devices as well. The third important change that we have brought into SanerNow platform is implementation of a hub and spoke distributed architecture. So what this means is that we don't need additional appliances and additional hardware specifications to deploy the scanner. We use the existing computing power within the organization's network and transform those devices to perform these scanning activity. So with that, it significantly eliminates the infrastructure components that are required to set up a vulnerability management solution. So no appliance, no additional hardware specification. And we've also enhanced our security checks repository to include, over the last 3+ years, we've been working on coverage for network devices that I mentioned. So we now have added thousands of checks to perform vulnerability scanning and configuration assessment across all these devices remotely. So our SCAP repository is already well known. We've been building the security checks repository since 2009. So we now have about 130,000 plus security checks that can be performed with our solution. And finally, we have integrated remediation capability as well, with patching and other measures that one could take to eliminate these vulnerabilities. I also want to take this opportunity to make another announcement. Our SanerNow Cyberhygiene platform has about 6 different applications addressing different cybersecurity use cases. And now we are presenting those 6 different tools in the form of 2 different suite of products, one focusing on security, risk, and compliance, which is the vulnerability management solution that I talked about, that has the vulnerability scanner, compliance management tool, asset visibility and exposure analysis tool, and also a patch management integrated with this. So it's a bundled suite of products. Customers will have option to choose security, risk, and compliance as one product. And apart from that, we also have endpoint management and security capabilities with our asset management tool and endpoint management tool, and patching and detection and response capabilities coming together to form another suite of product. So with this, our customers will be able to manage and secure their endpoints, gain visibility to the endpoint security controls, performance monitoring activities, and lots of checks that can be run in a matter of few seconds to get visibility to the entire endpoint activities, and at the same time control or act upon aberrations or issues or deviations that are present, including, for example, deploying software applications and doing application and device control. So there are array of these um, feature set that are part of this suite of product. So yeah, these are bundled offering where customers can choose separately based on the use case or the challenge that you are trying to address. With that, I would like to conclude my part and hand it over back to Jesse.
Thanks, Chandra. This is, I mean, this makes it more easier for some, I mean, the customers to implement. So now that I see that we have, if somebody wants to implement a security and risk compliance program, they would be able to use certain modules, and then the other set of if somebody wants to implement an endpoint management program, then there's a set of modules, and this makes it further, I mean, easier to implement. So this is exciting. With that, we also have Kaushik, Director of Engineering at SecPod's. So Kaushik, thanks for joining, and then we would like to hear from you. What are the upgrades to the product, and I'll hand it over to you now.
Thank you, Jaksir. Good morning and good evening, everyone. Um, like Chandra mentioned, I'm super excited to present all the SanerNow 5.0 release. Um, right, so SanerNow 5.0 release. So it brings in significant enhancements and capabilities, and also we have enhanced the user experience. So I'll be talking some of this. I'll also be giving you a product walkthrough where I'll be demonstrating how do you install network scanner, configure, and also some of the key capabilities in the asset management, compliance management, and vulnerability management tools. So with that, let's jump into the 5.0 feature capabilities. So definitely network scanner is one of the significant capability which we have added as part of 5.0 release. So with this feature, we not only have the capability to discover vulnerabilities and misconfiguration within the endpoint, but we'll now be able to do across the network. Right? So that's a very important aspect. Also, for any organization to get a comprehensive security posture, it is important to do the analysis for both network as well as the endpoint devices. So with this network scanner capability, you'll be able to accomplish both, which is going to give you a better insights about the entire organization's security posture. And in this era of DevOps and CI/CD, where we do continuous deployments almost on a daily basis or less than that, even the vulnerability scans has to be done almost on a daily basis, right? So we no longer can afford to wait and run the scan and then do the patch management on a weekly or a monthly basis. So Saner now provides the capability where you can automate your daily scans, and also you can also customize not only daily, but if you want to configure it as weekly, monthly, and also on-demand scan as well, right? So these capabilities have been built in. Apart from the existing devices, it is also important for us to know what are the new devices joining the network, right? So this also can be scheduled through the discovery scan feature, where at a certain interval, it can discover the new devices which have joined, and then we can either convert them into the endpoint devices or add to the network scanner scope. So some of this I'll be taking you through the product walkthrough as well. And the last point which I wanted to cover is again, for you to use the network scanning feature, you don't have to invest any hardware or additional investment. With your existing devices of endpoint, it is very easy for you to upgrade it and play the network scanner role. So with that, I'll explain about the SanerNow architecture and also explain how it gets upgraded. So SanerNow architecture comprises of three main components. One is the SecPod's cap feed, second one is the SanerNow server, and third one is the endpoint. Right? So SecPod SCAP feed, like Chandra mentioned, this is a repository, and in fact, it hosts the world's largest library of 130,000 plus security checks, and this list grows almost on daily basis. The next one is on the Saner server, which interacts with the endpoints. It gathers all the required information, and also it gets data from the SCAP repo, and it correlates to give a complete analysis about the organization's security posture. And the last one is the endpoint devices, right? So where you can see Saner now supports all the major OS, Windows, Mac, and major flavors of Linux like Debian, Red Hat, also Alpine. So, like I mentioned, we don't have to have additional investment for this. So, in this slide, if you look at Windows, right? So, assume you want to upgrade Windows endpoint device as network scanner, you'll be able to upgrade it. Similarly, uh, you can upgrade your existing Mac as well as the Linux agent to perform the network scanner role. So this is definitely a significant thing because you don't need to invest any additional hardware within your existing infrastructure. You'll be able to accomplish this. So let's now look at the various target devices which are supported. We do support switches, routers, gateway, firewall, hub, printers, IP camera, SCADA, web application storage device, and many other general purpose servers, as mentioned. Right? In fact, the list grows as we speak. The team is working on expanding the support for the target devices. Right? But currently in 5.0, we support all these target devices. Also, there has been extensive research done in the last 3 years to add the security checks for the remote assessment to support the above devices, right? And that journey is continuing as well. But there has been a significant effort put in to come up with all the security checks. Another important or key aspect is generally, if you see the agent scanning and the network scanning results, usually are two different things. And somebody like IT security person has to look at both as a different thing and look at manual effort to combine those. Whereas Saner now has this intelligence of combining both network scanner as well as the endpoint results, and it will present a unified view. So we can look at some of the dashboards as part of the product walkthrough, which I'm going to show shortly, where I'll show how the network scanner as well as the endpoint results we will be able to get a unified view. So in addition to the network scanner, there has been key enhancements in other areas as well. So we have made several changes in vulnerability management, asset management, and compliance management to increase the visibility and also to enhance the user experience. We have also enhanced the compliance management. So prior to 5.0 release, we could identify the misconfigurations, but to remediate, we had to access the patch management module. But with 5.0, uh, We can remediate misconfiguration as part of the configuration management module itself, so you don't have to navigate to patch management. In addition to that, we have also enhanced the patch management module. So now Saner now supports multiple remediation job and rule per device. Prior to this, if a job is running on a device, we would not be in a position to create another job or a rule. So now with this limitations removed, so you'll be able to configure multiple jobs, and we have built in a queuing system wherein jobs will get queued and it will get executed one after the other. So this is again one other significant enhancement which is part of 5.0. So these were some of the new feature and key enhancements. I'll now uh, I'll now take you through the product walkthrough and demonstrate some of the things what I just explained. I'll be sharing my screen.
Yeah, Kaushik, we can see your screen.
Thank you, Jagsir. So as soon as you log into Saner server, so this is the landing page. So for you to access the network scanner, you need to select the control panel. So here you can see the network scanner, which is the new feature which we have added. So once you select the network scanner, this is the network scanner home page. If you have multiple organization, you can select the drop down and select the organization for which you want to set up the network scanner. As part of the network scanner, if you see, if you have multiple accounts, again you can navigate to various. So I have two accounts as part of this. So let us go to network scanner demo. So if you're setting up new, definitely you'll not have any of the scanners. I have set it up for the demo purpose. So I already have two scanners here. So let's see how we can create a new scanner. So creating a new scanner is very simple. It is a three-step process and we can go through a wizard. So these are the three-step process for you to create a scanner. So first is we need to select the scanner. There are two different options. Then we need to assign a scan config and then a scan policy. First, let's look at how do we do a scanner selection. So there are two types of options we can select. One is to designate SanerNow agent to perform network scan, which means an endpoint already exists and you want to designate as a SanerNow agent. The second option is if you want to set up a new SanerNow agent and then upgrade it to network scanner. Right? So these are the two options available. So let's say if you want to set up a new SanerNow agent, it will ask you to select which operating system, right? You want to install the agent. So it can be Windows or Linux flavors like Debian, RPM, as well as Mac. So you can choose the operating system for which you want to install a new agent and you can download. Once you download and install the agent, then you'll get an option to upgrade it as network scanner. For this demo purpose, let's go through the designating a SanerNow agent to perform network scan. So in the drop down, it will list you all the endpoints which are available in your account for which you can choose which one you want to upgrade as network scanner. So I'll select one of them, which is Ubuntu, and click on next. So this is the second step where we need to provide a scan config. So let's give a name to it. So here you can mention the target IPs which you want to scan. Right? So this supports the CIDR format, and you can mention, for example, you want to scan the entire network of 1.x, you can provide like this. There are various other CIDR formats which you can provide. So you can mention your list of target devices here. Let's say you want to exclude certain IP addresses, you can provide them here. For example, you want the entire 1.x network, but you want to exclude certain IP address, you can provide as part of the exclude list. And then what are the ports we want to scan? So by default, we have selected all the important ports which needs to be scanned. And you can get more information on the default ports by clicking on the help icon. So we have set of TCP and UDP ports which we believe are important to scan. We also provide you an option to choose whether top 1000, top 500, top 100, right? So if none of this you want and you want to customize it, you can still say none and enter the custom ports here. So you have the capability to provide your own ports as well. So for this demo purpose, let's select the default ports. We also have a scan schedule, like I explained. So by default, it is none, where you want to run on demand. We also have an option to select daily, where you can uh, mention what is the start time. We can also mention weekly or monthly, right? So for now, I'll select none because I want to show how to do the on-demand scan. So this is the second step of scan config. The third step is the scan policy, right? So we need to associate a policy. So I'll explain more details about the policy, but in brief, this policy mentions what and all scripts has to be run, right? So uh, we have a default policy wherein 800 plus scripts have been selected. But if you want a custom policy, you can create and associate that as well. I'll be explaining you how to create a custom policy. So for the demo purpose, we'll choose the default policy and we'll say create. Like with that three-step process, we have completed how to create a scanner. It's as simple as that. So if you look at this is the Ubuntu which we just added, and there are three icons which is of sorry, yeah. So there are three icons. So one is if you look at the network scanner. Now if you look at it, the upgrade status, right? So its upgrade is waiting. Shortly you'll see the upgrade has started and it will be successful. This is about the endpoint device where the device is active. Now if you look at it, the network device is getting, the endpoint device is getting upgraded as network scanner. So with this, you can also use a drop-down option to associate a different scan config or a scan policy. Okay. So now if you look at it, uh, the scanner has been upgraded and now the status is idle. Now there are no tasks being executed by the network scanner. So here you can uh, initiate an on-demand scan. So now I'll be starting the scan. So if you look at it, its scan has been initiated, and during the scan, you'll not be able to edit the scan configure policy. So the scan has now been initiated. So while the scan is ongoing, let me cover other important features on this network scanner. So we have covered the home page. Now let's look at the scanners. So this gives you a complete view of all the scanners in this particular account, right? So there are three scanners now. This is the newly created scanner where the scan is ongoing. But if you look at the other two scanners, it will give you information about the last scan. You can also get the status. You can initiate the on-demand scan. And also if you want to delete a scanner and downgrade it to an endpoint device, you'll be able to do that. In addition to this, we also have intelligence to recommend certain devices as network scanner uh, devices. So what I mean is, out of all the endpoint devices, we have the intelligence to look at which devices has more CPU, RAM, the DHCP status, and also storage, and we are going to recommend so that you can designate here. So designating here also will upgrade this endpoint to a network scanner. If you don't want the recommended device, you can uncheck this. It will list all the available devices as well. You also have filters where you can select by the family or the operating system or subnets. So using this also you can upgrade your endpoint to a designated scanner and also do all the management here. Next is the scan config, which we already covered. But if you want to again edit or again create a new scan config, you can use this option. Scan policy. So we selected a default policy here. So let me take you through how to create a new policy. So again, new policy is two-step process. So this is what I was referring to in terms of all the 800 plus scripts which we will use to discover all the vulnerabilities on the network devices. So the first step is we need to be doing the script selection, right? So if you look at it, there are various families, and each of the family we have scripts. For example, let's say database, right? So we have all the popular databases, MongoDB, MariaDB, Microsoft SQL, Oracle, all of these, right? So each of the script has multiple checks where we discover the vulnerabilities. So you can customize it. Right? So for example, if you don't want certain families, you can uncheck them, or within a family, you don't want certain DB to be scanned. You can those checks can be disabled here. Once you customize it, you can go to the next, and if you have selected the web application server, you can all give the path. Otherwise, you can proceed to the next. Even me, the description, you can create a policy. So once you create this policy, again you can go back and associate the scanner if required, right? And you can also edit it as well as delete it. We also have another option where you can import a policy. So in an organization, if there are multiple accounts, let's say you've already created a policy in other account and you want to import it, you can use this option of import policy where you select the organization. Let's say I have two accounts, right? So you can select that account and then look at importing that particular policy. Right? So with that, you'll be able to import policy from any from another organization or account. And then finally, we have the logs where you can look at all the events and what are the time as well as the organization account and which user is doing what. Right? So this is about the network scanner. I will now explain about some of the dashboard changes which we have implemented. So this is the landing dashboard. So if you look at it, this is the total devices. We also give a breakup of both the managed device and unmanaged device. So in the managed device, you can see that the Windows, Linux, Mac OS, and all the network scanned devices are listed as others. And unmanaged devices are those devices which are discovered but not added or scanned yet, right? So you can choose to go and deploy them. And now let's go to the network scanner demo account. Again, you'll get a view of each of the uh, vulnerability management, compliance management, patch management, asset management, and endpoint management. And also you'll get a view about the number of devices here. So now let's look at one of the network scan devices. So for that, you need to go to the manage as well as devices. So if you look at it, if you see managed by as a network scanner, so all these devices are discovered by the network scanner, right? So you'll have various types of devices. Uh, let's say And also we have groups, right? So for example, you just want to look at some of the switches, you can click on the switch, or you want to look at some of the firewall, you can look at the specific firewall, or you want to look at all devices, you'll be able to do that. And also you can search based on IP address or the host name. So now within the network device, a network scan device, so let's go to individual device page. So this is one of the device which the network scanner has scanned. Right? So if you look at it, uh, these are the various vulnerabilities it has discovered. Right? So it will give you the list of CVEs and the title and also what asset it is and other information. And these are the misconfigurations which it has discovered. Right? So you get to know what is the configuration. Mm, what aspect of the configuration is not configured, and the title and the asset. Similarly, it will list all the assets what it has discovered, and the ports which are running, and also on the services. So with this, you get a view on the overall vulnerabilities and misconfiguration on a particular device. Right. So this is one aspect of it. Now, if you want to get a complete view on all of the devices in your account. So that's where now we can go into, let's say we'll go to the next account to get a view of that as well. We can go to any account and just taking you through the vulnerability management. So here, so this vulnerability management dashboard will give you a complete view of both network devices as well as endpoint devices. So that's where I was talking about the unified view. So let's quickly check each of this view and how those are helpful. So the first one is on the vulnerability statistics. So it gives you the criticality, high, medium, and low. This is based on the CVSS score. So you know total number of vulnerabilities are 3031 and the breakup of this. You can also select more info and sort out based on a particular device, or you can take a CSV and then analyze more details on it. But this gives you overall statistics based on the criticality. This gives you a view on the exploitability. CVSS has a category on the exploitability. For example, if something is known and publicly available, right? So that is comes under the category of public exploit available. Also, if there is an attack inside the network which can compromise rest of the network at a faster pace, that is categorized as high lateral movement. Like that, there are various categories, and it will give you an indication on number of percentage of such exploitability in the account of all the devices. So this is the high fidelity attacks. So this is a new schema which we have come up with. It is called as MVE, which is malware vulnerability enumeration. So these are some of the uh, popular attacks. So if you look at these names might be familiar to you. So what we do is the intelligence what we have built in is, so for example, zero login is an attack, right? So we know which and all CVEs these attacks are linked to, right? So with that, you'll be able to mitigate based on some of these attacks, right? And we also provide the information on what host uh, have this vulnerability, right? So this is very useful information for the IT security. So the next one is on the vulnerability devices. So this gives you a device view of number of risks and the severity distribution and how many assets, right? So for each one of them, still be able to look into it and click on the CVEs and get additional details on them, and also look at prioritizing what device needs the most attention and also the number of assets. This also gives you a status of each of the devices as well, whether they are active or inactive. And there are various filters. For example, if you want to select only the network devices, you can select others. so which will give you only those in devices or Windows or Linux. So this gives you a device view on how the vulnerabilities are there in each of the device. And the next one is will give you a vulnerability view. So here we looked at the devices, but here it is the vulnerability view, right? Which gives details about each of the vulnerability, its title and the severity, how many assets have the exposure to this vulnerability and the host, right? And when it was detected and the fix information as well. So again, all the filters work here, so you can filter based on your need and look at and analyze the vulnerabilities. So this gives the distribution based on the operating system. So if you want to look at how many vulnerabilities are there on Apple Mac, you can look at. So there are 221 vulnerabilities, and overall 8% of the total vulnerabilities are on Mac OS. Similarly, by the group, right? So you can create your own custom group and add your devices so that you can get a different view like this. For example, could be sales, finance, or it could be based on the operating system. And also you can look at the vulnerability aging, right? So number of vulnerabilities and how old they are. For example, there are 221 vulnerabilities which are older than 8 days. So this also gives you an information on uh, how many vulnerabilities are there and how old they are. So these two cards again give you additional information in terms of what are the top vulnerable assets. So here we saw asset view, but what are the top vulnerable assets? For example, if you look at it, this particular asset has about 1,370 risks, right? So this is something needs an immediate attention. So it helps to prioritize which assets needs to be mitigated first, and it also gives you an information on number of hosts which have been affected for this. So this is the top remediation recommendation. This is also based on the risks. So we also provide the remediation recommendation, what needs to be done. Okay. So this is about the vulnerability management, and a lot of these enhancements and user experience has been increased compared to the prior releases. Now let's look at the configuration management. Similar to vulnerability management, complaints management also, there has been enhancements to improve the user experience as well as to visualize and prioritize the configuration, misconfiguration tasks. So this first one is the rule compliance. So here you'll get for all the rules which has been configured, how many are passed and how many are failed, right? So in this case, only 32% rules have been passed. That means it's only 32% complaint. The remaining are non-compliant, which means action has to be taken, right? We need to review why there are rules and we need to fix the misconfiguration. Similarly, this gives you a device compliance. Out of all the devices, how many are compliant or non-compliant? So in a device, if there are 100 rules and there are few rules which fails, that device is considered as non-compliant. Similarly, you also get a group wise, right? For example, in Mac OS, how many rules have failed, right? So this also helps you to get a different view, right? So device, rule, as well as group wise. Now moving on to the benchmark. So using the benchmark, you can create a new benchmarks. Once the benchmark has been created, so here is where you can get a complete compliance statistics by the benchmark. Right? For example, if you look at the password policy, right? So overall, if you look at five rules have been five are compliant and five are non-compliant, and you can drill down this password policy and look at each one of these rules. So if you look at here, the five rules have passed, five rules have failed on this particular thing. So you can then look at drill down by the rule and then again look at the statistics of that. You can also export the CSV of just one benchmark to analyze more details, or you can export the CSV of the entire all the benchmarks so that you can get a macro view of what's happening. So we looked at the benchmark view. Now this gives you a misconfigured devices, a device view. So you can look at per device how many missing configurations are there and how is the severity distributed. Right? For example, if you look at this Ubuntu, there are 71 missing configuration, and again you can drill down on each one of them. So the above one is devices. Similarly, we have misconfigurations as well. So which gives you by CCE. Right? So this is by the CCE explains about the what is the title, severity, and which assets needs to be fixed in terms of the misconfiguration and the host. Similarly, we have top deviant assets where we go by the asset and where most of the rules have failed, right? So that also helps in prioritizing. And also top remediation recommendations. So for all the misconfiguration deviation, we also look at prioritizing and recommending what should be fixed first. So these are some of the configuration management enhancements we have done. And like I mentioned, now we no longer need to go to patch management to carry out the fix misconfiguration. This can be achieved through the compliance management itself. And this is one of the other capability which we have built on the patch management. Like I mentioned, uh, using the automation, you can create a remediation rule where earlier there were limitation of having one rule per device. Now you can create multiple rules. Similarly, you can look at missing patches and you can create remediation jobs. For example, you want to remediate this particular asset, you can go and create a remediation task. And like this, you can create multiple remediation tasks per device. So we no longer have the restriction of completing one task before creating another. So this is again one of the significant enhancements we have done in the product. Yeah, I think with that, I would like to conclude my part. So like I mentioned, I covered the network scanner and also how do we get the unified view of endpoint management and network scanner, and also some of the enhancements and user experience we have built in 5.0 in the asset management, compliance management, as well as the patch management. So with that, I'd like to conclude and hand it over to Jagsir.
Yeah. Hi, Kaushik. So yeah, I mean, this was, I would say mind-boggling. I mean, I'm really happy to see all of these updates to the product, and then it makes me both happy and proud. So, Kaushik, one, and since I'm not sure, I mean, not many know that you have recently joined SecPod, right? So, how has been your experience with SanerNow since you have seen it transform so well? And then, other question that comes to my mind is, how do you feel customers would benefit from these recent upgrades?
Yeah, it's been an amazing experience. Really excited to see how um, we are solving actual customer issues in terms of automating and providing them end-to-end view on their entire security posture and building the cyber hygiene. Right. So last few releases, we have been building a lot of capabilities, which is going to help customers to manage and secure their endpoints, right? So really excited, especially with the 5.0, there have been a lot of capabilities which have been built. I'm sure this is going to ease out a lot of manual tasks as well as going to give them a better visibility into their organization's security posture.
Okay, thank you so much, Kaushik, for that walkthrough of the recent updates. And that brings us towards the end of the session, where we would like to. I think we have a couple of questions, and then I can keep going through one by one, and then Chandra and Kaushik, I mean, you can take them up. Starting with the first one, we have a question. When can we expect the agentless scanning?
Okay, I'll take that.
Yeah.
So, if agentless scanning means performing remote assessment of, I mean, vulnerability assessment remotely, we already have that with 5.0 as Kaushik demonstrated. We can have our agent transform into a network scanner, and that will be able to perform remote assessment across all the devices where agents cannot be deployed, like the network devices in the examples that Kaushik already mentioned. So that capability is already there in 5.0.
Okay. Next question we have is how can I set this up to report compliance with the CIS benchmark?
Yes, that is a good question. So we don't have natively CAS benchmarks loaded into our platform, but what we have is a superset of all those rules that are part of the template that we have created. So one could actually customize those rules and generate a report for any uh, standard guidelines and benchmarks available in the industry. So that's one unique capability that our product brings is the ability to edit these rules, customize, and select what we actually need and what we don't need, and perform a scan and build a report that is specific to an industry guidelines requirement.
Okay. The next question we have, Chandra, is what firewalls are supported? Is it brand specific?
I think today we do cover a good number of firewalls that are out there, and on our website we've also listed all the products that we support today, and we will continue to enhance and add new target for vulnerability assessment. We should be able to share the link
Okay.
for the coverage that we have today.
Mhm. Okay, perfect. And also, if you go to our website, secpod.com/documentation, you'll find all the information behind. I mean, all the coverage specific information and documentation for the product at secpod.com/documentation. Then the next question is, since we have a scanner with 5.0 now, how discovery happens? I want to know more. I think Kaushik already demonstrated that, but Chandra, would you like to add anything specific there?
No, I think the network scanner that we have, so it goes about discovering all the available devices that are part of the network, and also the ports that are open, services that are running, and then goes about performing the assessment on all those devices.
Okay. What are the scanner requirements and compatibility with OS?
I think let Kaushik take the question.
Yeah,
With
Kaushik.
respect to network scanner update.
Sure. Like I mentioned, we support all the major OS. So all Windows supported. Linux, we support Debian as well as Red Hat, but we only support 64-bit. We currently don't support Alpine, but we support Mac, right? So the only restriction is Alpine is not supported and 32-bit Linux is not supported. Leaving that, all the other platforms, Windows 32-bit, 64-bit, all 64-bit Linux, Red Hat and Debian, and Mac are supported.
Okay, thanks, Kaushik. So another question is, this question is on the data security. So for the MSP partners that work with us, customers usually have this question that how secure is their data on SecPod Cloud? Um, would you like to take that up, Kaushik, or
Yeah, I'll take that up,
Chandra? Okay.
Jaksir. So
Yeah.
whether it is MSP, MSSP partners or our enterprise customers, I think this is definitely one concern, more so in the recent past because of the attacks that are happening or occurring. So we have implemented industry recommended guidelines, and we've also enforced some stringent measures as far as the data security is concerned. Also, from our tool specific security hardening. So we have all of those in place. Um, so that way, SanerNow's cloud environment is definitely secure. And
Okay.
the customers who do not want to use the cloud-based deployment, we also have an on-premise deployment that one could choose from as an alternative deployment mechanism.
Okay. How frequently does SecPod update the knowledge base and vulnerability checks?
Yeah, so the security checks are being updated every day. So we are one of the vendor who's covering latest vulnerabilities on almost daily.
Okay. And so if a customer of one of our MSP or MSSP partner, they want to run a scan, is there an option in SanerNow to do that, to run light on aggressive scans, but the customer can choose that?
Yeah, so customizations are definitely there. So users could give specific range of IP addresses, could configure specific policies in selecting and deselecting uh, certain checks that may or may not be required, etc. So we have various options that are available for creating the scan policy and scan target configurations that would allow performing remote assessment of these devices.
Okay. Okay. And I think this question was also more, directed towards, is there a customization possible in SanerNow to configure, for the customer themselves, to configure the thresholds on the scanning bandwidths, and what would be the impact of scanning all the ports together? Will it consume a lot of bandwidth?
No, it definitely does not. So there are ways that can be controlled. So one of the unique thing that we have done is also in order to reduce the load on the network scanner, so you kind of distribute it. So the hub and spoke the model that we talked about allows us to distribute the scanning, make it light, and being able to complete the scanning in minutes and not in multiples of hours.
Okay. How is the authentication? The next question is on the authentication of the assets when the scanner is running. How is the scanner being able to authenticate assets?
Yeah, so in our deployment mode, we have both network-based assessment as well as the agent-based assessment. So the agent takes care of performing all the checks that are necessary to be run on the individual device. Wherever remote assessment is required or remote or the network scanner will be able to perform those probes from an external uh, viewpoint. So that way there is no need for device authentication specifically required. So you don't need to pass security credentials to our platform and then perform it. It's not necessary to do that.
Okay. So next question is around pricing. So how does the pricing work? And then is it true? Is there a monthly minimum to get started with Saner now?
I think we can probably take this question. So our pricing is based on the number of devices that are being scanned, including the agents and the network devices. And we do have monthly billing option as well as annual billing for enterprises who would like to purchase a bulk of licenses and deploy it. So we have considered good amount of flexibility in our licensing approach. So I think we can take that up.
Okay.
The person who has posted the question.
Mhm. How does the network scanner? How is this network scanner? How competitive, rather, is it with others such as Nessus?
That's a good question. So yeah, we are definitely competitive. Our security checks database has been built since 2009, and we have enormous amount of checks that are being performed on various targets, including the Windows, Linux, Mac, plus the servers and network devices that are coming in now. So we definitely have a competitive advantage with respect to any of the other tools that are out there. But there are two significant differentiators that I would like to highlight. One is the simple automation focused approach that we have with our vulnerability management becomes a daily routine to perform the scanning and report, and you get to know vulnerabilities every day. As we were talking early on, new vulnerabilities are being discovered every day and being exploited daily, so it doesn't make sense to perform monthly or quarterly scanning. So we have this automated approach of being able to run scan every day, and we get the latest security posture for that particular day. So that's one significant differentiator. And the other is our ability to remediate the vulnerabilities that we identify in our tool. So that essentially completes the entire life cycle of a vulnerability management need. Being able to visualize what is going on, identify and assess vulnerabilities and prioritize, and then roll out the fixes and make it into an automated cycle. And I think there's no other vendor who do this end-to-end lifecycle management of vulnerability, including fixing the vulnerabilities that we identify.
Okay, awesome. The next question is on the CIS benchmarks. When are we, or if we will be publishing CIS benchmark tools?
So as I mentioned earlier, so we have templates that are a superset of the CAS benchmark or NIST 853 or NIST 171 and various other industry guidelines. One could actually create a benchmark meeting these requirements, CAS included. So it is possible to create a benchmark and report on the security posture against these benchmarks today. So it's already there. So we can probably do another walkthrough for this particular question.
Okay. Then can you elaborate on the hub and spoke model with existing device a little bit, Chandra?
Yeah. So SanerNow mainly focused on endpoints, and then we had an endpoint agent that is installed on each of the endpoint devices that are being managed and secured. So what we have done now is ability to upgrade or do a role change on some of these agents, where you could assign a role of a network scanner for some of those agents that are present within the organization's environment. And there will be enough computing power within the organization available that is idle. So this will give us opportunity to utilize that computing power. And also, because we don't have to invest in installing and setting up appliances and other hardware specific or specialized network scanner devices, you can actually set up multiples of these network scanners, designate those, and perform scanning. So that way the scan duration becomes extremely distributed, and thereby you're able to perform scan quickly uh, without overloading particular system.
Okay.
And any of these devices that are having our agent installed already, you should be able to designate those to become network scanner. So that it becomes, whether it is Windows, Linux, or Mac device.
Okay. So that means the enterprise does not have to invest any further, and they can use their existing infrastructure to also perform network scanning.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Perfect. So there's another question, I think, and with keeping the time in mind, we can take another few questions, maybe another 5 minutes. The next question we have, Chandra, is the EDR, I mean, does the EDR have any capability to set IOA for DOS and DDoS attacks?
Against an individual device. So this being EDR focused on endpoint, yes, it is possible if the target is a particular endpoint. But if the question is at the network perimeter level, for example, that is not part of the EDR scope that we have. But yes, we should be able to create certain rules to detect symptoms of DOS or DDoS. Yeah, I think that is part of our other suite of products, the endpoint management and security capability that we have.
Okay. Where are your cloud server located? Are they in the US, AWS, or Azure?
Yes, in the US, we have hosted it on AWS.
Okay. There's another question, and that's primarily related to patching. There are some cases where if patches were installed, the host won't come up after restart. How does Saner now deal with this case?
Mm. Yeah, I don't know. To answer that question, we have not seen any such instance where systems are not coming up. But at times, I think you will have certain patches maybe released by Microsoft, and it actually disturbs the endpoint, and maybe it crashes, for example. So what we do is in our security lab, we would have tested all the patches before publishing those patches into our repository. So that way, it's not just taking the vendor patch as is and trying and applying the patches, but these are being tested, validated in our labs, and then we push the security metadata into our product. So that way, there is a secondary check that is there. And also in our patch management, there is a capability where you could roll it out on a small test bed and then make sure that the patch is working, and then only push it to other systems. So there is a workflow built in the patch management tool that can ensure some level of protection there for such scenarios.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that, Chandra. And I think with that we can wrap up the Q&A session. And for those of you, if you have any uh, further questions, you can email them to us at info @secpod.com, or you can drop us a note on our website, www.secpod.com. And for those of you who are considering a solution, evaluating solutions, and whether it's for security risk compliance or endpoint management, we do have a 30-day unlimited access trial access on 10 devices. You can go ahead, try the free version of Saner now for 30 days and evaluate your use cases, and reach out to us if you need any help or support. With that, we can end today's session. Chandra and Kaushik, thanks to both of you, and congratulations. on this latest upgrade and more happiness with customers.
Right, thank you. Thanks everyone who are part of this session today, and thank you for taking part of this. Thanks, Jagsir and Kaushik.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thanks,
Chandra. Thank
everyone.
you, Jaxir. Thank you all.
Yeah.